You know how we're always in the market for good quality handmade reeds? Well, MKL is the one-stop shop for handmade oboe reeds where you can try reeds from various makers and select the one that is best for you. Visit mklreeds.com and enter coupon code DOUBLEREEDDISH, 3 separate words, all caps, for free shipping on your first order.
Today's episode is brought to you in part by Double or Nothing Reeds. You know them. They're the company that's dedicated to providing excellent handmade oboe and bassoon reeds to discriminating double reed players of all ages and abilities. And good news, Double or Nothing Reeds has recently expanded to sell double reed tools and supplies, gift items, and more. This includes knives, knife blades, thread, staples, cane, bags, and resources for students. Better yet, as authorized Fox and Yamaha dealers, they offer an extensive range of oboes and bassoons for all levels. Additionally, they sell quality used instruments on consignment. And if you're looking for private oboe lessons and can't find anyone nearby, Double or Nothing Reeds offers oboe lessons via Skype. Visit their website, doubleornothingreeds.com, for good quality and affordable reed making supplies and resources, lessons, instruments, and much more.
Hi, I'm Galit Kaunitz.
And I'm Jackie Wilson, and you're listening to Double Reed Dish,
a podcast for oboists,
bassoonists,
and the people who love them.
So I have to apologize if I sound a little different from normal. Today is the very last day of finals week, the official end of the semester, and I forgot my microphone at work, and I just cannot will myself to drive back and get it. So
it's usually me who forgot the microphone, so I am fine. As long as it's not me.
This is actually the only time I've ever done that. So in 3 years plus one episode, I'll forgive myself. So at the end of the semester comes studio parties, studio holiday celebrations. How was yours?
Oh, it was so much fun. I promise my students every year that if one of the oboes wins a concerto competition, because we have a band one and an orchestra one at USM, that I will provide the studio with a pizza party. And lo and behold, luckily, fantastically, one of my students, Lilia, won the band concerto competition. So she's going to get to play the first movement of the Legacy Concerto by Oscar Navarro next semester. And so I owed them all pizza. So I had them over last night, and they ate pizza and played with my dog, and I brought my cat out kicking and screaming for 1 second. And we played White Elephant, and it was hilarious. Like, the number one gift of the evening was from my student Ashley, who is a gorgeous artist, and she painted like an original Ashley oboe painting. She's posted in the IDRS Facebook group before. She is so talented, and these paintings are so beautiful. And she included like a small one as the gift. And the student who got it was like, "I'm serious. Don't steal it. I'm serious. I am so serious."
That would be me.
Everyone was too scared to steal it, so it never got stolen. It was so funny, but it was really beautiful. And I was like, "You better frame it." She's like, "I will."
Intimidation is a completely valid white elephant technique.
It's a strategy
to utilize. And
it was
I'm
successful. Did you have a studio party?
I did, and it was kind of a new thing for us because in the past we've done the double reed carols, and the place that we did it shut down. And so we didn't really have a good venue. So we were kind of without a home for double reed carols this year. And so I said, let's just have a studio party at my place instead. And they did, instead of White Elephant, they did Secret Santa, and they drew names for each other. And so it was really funny watching what they got. Like some of them were really thoughtful and like went to the other one's like girlfriend and was like, what does he really want? And like got some shocked faces like, oh my gosh, how did you know I wanted this thing? And then other like goofy gifts. So that was hilarious. And I got all of my students a mug, and I like based it off of either them or my relationship with them. And so I have a student who is from Chicago, and I got her a mug with the Chicago skyline on it. And I have another student who's like extremely jovial and just like so happy and full of joy, and I got her this like bright yellow mug with a huge smiley face on it, and just tried to like make everything, you know, personal and let them feel seen and whatnot. So that went over really well.
Sweet. I didn't even clean my house. I was like, I'm getting hot and ready pizzas, and you're gonna sit in my dirty house.
To be fair, I got them pizza too. I did not cook.
I was like, it's either cheese or pepperoni. We're not doing anything fancier.
Yeah. Then I was like, oh, it's Christmas. We should have some Christmas cookies. Oh, Chips Ahoy it is. I can pull this easy tab real easy. Eat up, kids.
Oh my God, that's such a mood.
Listen, it is the end of the semester. We are all at our end of our rope. I cannot be making 7-layer dip. Much love to all you bassoon teachers who can like roast a turkey for your students. It's not
anybody
me.
Do that? I sincerely want to know if somebody makes like actual food for their students.
Oh, I'm sure there are people who do it. But yes. In fact, I'm sure there are people who are like horrified that
Little Caesars and the dirty floor.
Little Caesars and Chips Ahoy.
We love you. You're amazing. Thank you for all your hard work. Here's a Little Caesars hot and ready.
One of my students brought her Nintendo. I don't even know what it's called. Like, I am not a gamer. I'm not into video games. Oh, I think it was a Switch. Is that a thing?
Is that a thing?
Someone is like screaming at their listening device of like what the Nintendo thing is called. And I'm sorry to those people. Oh yeah. I don't typically feel old, but she brought her Nintendo gaming unit that's new and was like, basically, Dr. Wilson, I want to watch you try to do Mario Kart. And because like they made some reference to Mario Kart that I didn't get, and you could tell they were all like, this is a really normal thing. Why don't you know about it? And so they thought it would be like the most hilarious thing ever to try to teach me how to play Mario Kart. And so they brought the video games and had me play and laughed at me. And then when they'd had their fill, they were like, all right, hand it over, and sat on my couch and played video games for a while. And I laughed at them.
Hey, oboists! Have you ever found it difficult to sort out when and how to find a new oboe or English horn? Oboe Chicago streamlines the process, providing personal and professional consultation and a large selection of lovely instruments. The process feels comfortable and thorough. Selection includes Effleray of Paris, Howarth of London, Covey oboes, and Fox products. For a credit of $100 towards shipping, mention Double Reed Dish when you call or email Shauna. For a current listing of Oboe Chicago's selection, please visit www.oboechicago.com.
This wouldn't be a double read podcast if we didn't talk about knives and knife sharpening. Since day one, Genda reed knives have been the highest quality and the sharpest reed knives on the market, and Genda Industries has been a driving force in educating double reed players on how to sharpen and maintain their reed knives, since it is the single most important tool in our reed making kit. Now, Genda has launched a full line of sharpening equipment to meet your sharpening needs. They are offering a wide variety of full-size and travel-size sharpening stones, strops, and compounds that can be utilized in the studio, the music hall, or on the go, and will make your sharpening better. You've got a great reed knife, and now it's time to start using good sharpening equipment. Add the code DRDGenda, all caps, no spaces, at checkout and get 10% off any Genda reed knife maintenance kit, reed knife sharpening book, cutting block, and reed tool roll. Visit them at www.gendaindustries.com. Oh, and they're more than just reed knives.
We are delighted and excited to welcome Katherine Young Steele, Principal Oboe of the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, to Double Reed Dish. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Could we start off by having you tell us how you came to play the oboe?
Sure. My story begins with having great parents who actually were musicians or are currently still musicians themselves, and having people who really recognized the necessity and importance of taking music lessons. So they started me taking piano lessons when I was about 5 years old from a person who became incredibly prolific in my life, Mrs. Seeley, who recently died. And then I actually was able to be fortunate enough to be given her piano with some help from my parents. But anyway, she started me on the piano, and I took lessons pretty seriously. She was very rather demanding as far as having a young student, and so I kind of got equipped right away to handle some of that responsibility. And then when it came time to choose instruments in the 5th grade, my parents, who were music teachers, my mom was a music teacher her entire career. She was also a flutist and was always teaching music lessons in my house. And my dad had been a high school band director up until about the time I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, and then switched careers and became an elementary school principal, went back to school and got a PhD in educational administration, and then became a principal. And so he was always teaching lessons in my house too, even after he stopped being a band director. And so I always had music happening in my house, whether it was myself playing the piano or my parents teaching flute lessons or trombone lessons, or sometimes even tuba lessons in the basement, plummeting up through the house. And so when it came time to choose an instrument, I really, really thought that my destiny was going to be the trumpet or the French horn. I really just felt that was what commanded my attention, and I really felt like I could, hang with the guys and play a louder instrument. That was sort of my personality, I guess, at the time, and perhaps still is. And so I went into the night where I could choose an instrument with the band director, thinking, first of all, number one, that I had already made my decision into a brass instrument, and secondly, that I knew everything I needed to know because my parents sort of raised me that way. And so and I had certainly had that going on in my life for quite a number of years up until that point. And so so I opened up the case of the trumpet and started to make a noise, and it was absolutely awful, and it hurt really badly in my mouth because my teeth at the time came to quite an triangular point. And so braces were very much in my future, and certainly something that my parents were planning on. And so the people at the band night, who were probably, I think, representatives from different music stores in the area. They said, okay, you can take a trumpet home, but I'll let you take this trumpet home if you promise that you'll also take an oboe home. And I said, oh, okay, So I come home and I'm like so excited about the trumpet, and it's shiny and brass, and it has 3 buttons that just move down so interestingly. And I just thought, this is great. And I opened that trumpet up again, and it was not good. And I thought, well, this is not very fun. And so I said, oh, let me just see that oboe. And, it had the fiber cane reed and the, kind of menthol smelling court grease. And I opened that case, and and it was something that I kind of still to this day remember thinking, wow, I can actually do this. And I felt confident doing it because all of those years of my mom teaching flute lessons, I was sitting on her lap, scribbling in the books, doing things, trying to play that flute myself. And I think I could suddenly play the oboe a little bit because the fingerings were similar, and I could I thought, wow, I'm pretty good at this. And so now years later, I've told this story many times, and years later, I realized that my parents sort of planned this all out ahead of time for me. They knew that something like the oboe would be better fitted for me, and they wanted me to potentially be challenged by a different instrument, a more difficult instrument perhaps. And so they had actually, because they were music teachers, they had obviously been very good friends with some of the local music store owners and whatnot. And they had sort of planned this out. And it just so happened that the son of the local band shop owner, music store owner, Kaufman Music, his son was an oboe major at a university not too far from my house. And then he became my first oboe teacher, actually. So I started studying, right off the bat with this, probably 19 or 20-year-old kid named Matt Kaufman. And he got me started on making reeds at like the 6th grade level, which was insane because my mother used to make me make the reeds out on the picnic table in Ohio, because she didn't want the mess of the scrapings in her house. Little did she know that would become her destiny for many years to come. But so I have fond memories of kind of him showing me a knife and a really, really coarse sharpening stone with honing oil, and going out to the to the picnic table and working on reeds, which was far too young and certainly didn't have any business doing that. But soon after sort of working with him, getting me started on some basic technique things, he realized that I was worth finding a real teacher who could actually take me through the steps. And so through him, and also through my parents who had attended Ohio University themselves in Athens, Ohio, they had made some calls and talked to the oboe teacher at Ohio University, who was a new teacher herself. And that person was Donna Conady. And so, and she is basically solely responsible for turning me into this sort of rugged kid into the person that was able to audition for music schools later on. And so I did weekly lessons with her. My parents drove me 1 hour each way through the Hocking Hills of central and southern Ohio to Athens from my house in Lancaster. And each week I met with her, and she was just absolutely instrumental, for lack of a better pun, in getting me squared away with all of the appropriate techniques and things having to do with the body and breathing, and just, she started me over and really got me groomed. And she did it somewhat reluctantly at first. I think she was thinking, oh, I'm a new teacher. I've got this new college studio, and I'm not sure if I'm really interested in teaching a younger student, but she did say that if I was willing and able, she would be happy to do it. And we just kind of clicked, and it was an amazing, amazing journey for me as a youngster, because she was so patient and so encouraging, but also extremely challenging at the same time. And so it was I was very fortunate to have found her at that particular time. And so I did all of the typical high school stuff with her help. And then I also, by the way, maintained a really serious piano study all the way through high school as well. So I always had 2 lessons every week, and sometimes youth orchestra and all the other stuff that high school students are doing. And then Donna told my parents that she thought it would be worth thinking about auditioning for places like Eastman, kind of guided me into having dream schools, sort of schools that were pretty attainable, and then sort of kind of, pretty confident places that I could get accepted into. And so she encouraged my parents to let me apply to Eastman. And then I did, essentially, and got accepted and started at the Eastman School of Music with Richard Kilmer, where that kind of, formed my training further, obviously, and also in some ways started my life over again as a young music student, because that was really an unbelievable place to go. First of all, because of being in his esteemed studio under his guidance, but also to be surrounded by not only oboe players who were my peers at that point, but also just phenomenally open-minded, well-rounded musicians on all instruments. And so I was one of those fortunate students that was accepted, and some of those oboe players in that studio are my lifelong friends to this day. And so I'm fortunate, and I should say, I guess I'm glad that I was one of those Eastman oboe players at the time. And then my parents also really wanted me to get a degree in music education as well. So I actually auditioned as a performance major at Eastman, and really it was important to me that I could feel like I was going to be good enough to get into Eastman as a performer, because I felt like that was, a conservatory. It was something that was really important to me. I didn't want to be in the oboe studio as solely an education major. So I actually added music ed by doing an interview over the phone with some of the music ed professors at Eastman, and they heard some of my story, and they knew that teaching was something that was in my blood, and certainly something that I was passionate about doing, sort of in conjunction with performing. And so I also completed an education degree there as well. So again, that was something that really surrounded me with really interesting viewpoints on education and teaching, and sort of techniques that I feel are really vital to the way I teach currently now, and certainly exposed me to some excellent experiences that I'm forever thankful for. And so I'm pro oboe performance, and I'm pro music ed every step of the way. And actually for me, I also sort of by accident realized that Richard Kilmer was so himself passionate about music education, because that was something that he did as well. And he taught public school strings for many years before deciding to really become an oboe player. And so he really relished the fact that I was interested in that. And he made it very easy for me to feel like I was able to do both things, and never once made me feel like I was lesser because I decided that I wanted to focus also on music education. So, which obviously is a huge plus and benefit to be studying with a teacher that feels that type of difference can be made in the field of education. And so that's that's been something that I've tried to continue through my career, my life, and also into my teaching as well. So that was my Eastman time. And then as I was finishing my 4 years at Eastman, Mr. Kilmer and I would have discussions about what the next steps should be. And I at that point had been accepted to a few summer festivals and sort of had been made to feel like my sort of playing was on par with some of the other students my age from other conservatories and big schools like Juilliard and Curtis and New England and places like that. So he had sort of thought, I think graduate school would be a great place for you to go. And so I, long story short, basically I decided to go to Rice because I had been told that the orchestral training program at Rice was really just absolutely out of this world and really important in training students who really felt like orchestra was where they wanted to end up. And so luckily I was accepted to Rice and then moved to Houston and began studying with Robert Atherholt. And then finished at Rice after 2 wonderful years and having wonderful influences from lots of different professors there, as well as Larry Ratcliffe, the orchestra conductor. And then sort of out of the blue, I took an audition for the New World Symphony and got in and was certainly not expecting that and just kind of was actually preparing at the same time as those auditions for New World and Civic and things like that. I was preparing to have to maybe continue into school and take doctoral exams and whatnot. But luckily I was one of the people chosen to go to the New World Symphony in Miami, which of course then was a tremendous opportunity that allowed for me to really focus on my own playing, on taking auditions, and just really get into the zone of playing in an orchestra. And so for about 4 years in Miami, that was my mission, and luckily it worked out, and I got my first job in the Florida Orchestra in the Tampa Bay area of Florida right after I was technically finished at New World. So that's my long journey.
I relate so much to so many of the things you said, especially having janky teeth pre-braces. And that's so funny that your parents like tricked you into playing the oboe.
Yeah, I think it's a very unique story. And my parents are really, I think they just, as a flutist and a trombonist, they thought, well, she's ready to do something maybe a little bit different. And so I played the oboe, and my sister, 3 years younger than me, she played the French horn. And so they got their wish.
It's a good combo, oboe.
Yeah, definitely.
I would love to hear more about your experience in New World Symphony. It's such a special program, and I would love to hear in more detail what you got out of that program and specifically what helped you in the audition process.
Sure. Well, New World is a really unbelievable place, and we often refer to it as sort of like musical utopia because you're given really unbelievable experiences. They have a tremendous budget to do really prolific things. And I think, first of all, Michael Tliston Thomas, who I believe to be one of the geniuses, so to speak, of the classical music world, he's extremely innovative. He has a lot of very wonderful ideas that are often very cutting edge. He has somewhat of a free rein in a sense to get some of those projects done. Back when I was there was not the new fancy concert hall. In fact, they were working on trying to get some of the land grants and permission and through City Hall and stuff like that while I was there. I was actually, I remember going to some of those city hall meetings and sort of rallying to let us have that opportunity to build that amazing venue. But when I was there, it was a really great place to try things and fail. And I mean, I think that came from the top. I mean, Michael Thomas was able to try things, and certain things would work and certain things wouldn't. But we were, first of all, we were surrounded by, the top students, theoretically, in the country at the time. And we were, that does something to your sort of psyche and your mindset. And it tells you that, you're here for 3 or 4 years. You really need to immerse yourself in these opportunities and play with the best people and try things and just sort of focus on, allowing yourself to meld and grow and figure out a way to make sense of this sort of utopian environment where you're, living on South Beach and you're playing with phenomenal conductors, and you're playing with 2 other oboists, but not only 2 other oboists, but an entire orchestra of people that are at the top of their game, all preparing simultaneously together for auditions. And I think one of the things that was good and sort of bad about it at the same time was that you would see, for example, like a clarinetist going to take an audition, and you would think, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And he would come back, or he or she would come back and talk about their experiences and of the audition, and then you would think, okay, this is how it's going to go for me next time, when it's my turn, and da 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 da. And so there was just this experience of talking about auditions constantly. We would all we were all living together in these old Art Deco hotels that had been converted into apartments for us, obviously. And so we were all living together, and, we would be hanging out by the pool or whatever, going to the beach, or just, even at Starbucks, the auditions were just the absolute number one talking point. And so you became very much involved, so to speak, in auditions and the ways that committees, seemed to respond to certain things in auditions, and that. And so the negative was that, okay, even if it wasn't an oboe audition, you felt this sort of anxiety about, oh gosh, this is flute, or this is, bassoon, and he just won a job, or she just won a job, and this is happening. And you just kind of have this feeling of like, oh my gosh, is this going to happen to me? Am I going to be one of these people? Am I going to be the next person to come back from an audition having won a job? And so I think I had to sort of learn to cope with that adrenaline and that anxiety a little bit, and make myself focus and center into that zone of like, okay, if I can't do this, if this doesn't work out for me by the time I'm out of here, my time is up here, because it's a limited it's a limited 3, sometimes 4-year program, then I need to have plan B, and I need to figure out what I'm going to be happy doing if this job, search / audition path doesn't work out. And so I was able to kind of do that. And I'm sort of just always been equipped to being okay with however things turn out, because of how hard I try to work at, daily. And so I was in the position, a lot of times during that New World experience for me, there were several auditions. There were lots of big auditions that had happened for the oboe during that time. Lots of English horn jobs, lots of second jobs, lots of first oboe jobs. That was sort of the mid 2000s where some of that was really going on, and lots of changing and in the oboe world was happening. And so there were a lot of auditions to take, and each one of those experiences obviously helped me grow, and some were a total waste of money, and some were furthermore important in my journey and understanding of how that all was going to work out. But luckily I was able to win a job in the Florida Orchestra About the midpoint of my fourth year, I was awarded an extra fourth year, and then I was able to do that. And so but it's a grueling place, but one that is also extraordinarily rewarding. I got to go to Rome, Italy with the orchestra while I was there, and played a couple of really wonderful concerts there. And then we also got to go to Carnegie Hall a couple of different times. So those are experiences that were really, really terrific for a young person. And to be honest with you, a young person that didn't even really 100% know that this was what I was meant to do. Like the orchestra path was still kind of finding its way for me. And so, but it gave me, continued to give me more exposure to people and to experiences that helped sort of lock into place what I was really destined, I guess, to be as a professional. So.
Kind of related, could you talk to us about the process of preparing and auditioning for and winning your position in the Milwaukee Symphony?
Well, I was in the Florida Orchestra for about 6 seasons, and each year I was in the orchestra, it was a tremendously wonderful first job for me. I, first of all, was really lucky that I had friends who were also young and starting out their careers. Some of them had come over from New World with me at the same time. Actually, Anthony Georgeson, who's now associate principal bassoon in Atlanta, he and I were there together as principal bassoon and principal oboe in Florida. And we had some really great young people. Andrea Overturf, the now English hornist in San Diego, she was also there. We were kind of all joining the ranks at the same time. And so Florida Orchestra for a lot of that time just felt like an extension somewhat of New World. And I was really liking it a lot there, but I was unfortunately part of a time period in that orchestra where things were really turning south financially each year. And actually the my first week on the job there, when I had just moved everything from Miami and my parents had helped me do all of that, my first day on the job was actually a meeting of the union to try to decide whether or not they should strike or not. So it was very scary. I remember walking out of the meeting, calling my parents, crying, saying, "What am I doing? What did I just do? I moved here and now they're going to go on strike." And they didn't go on strike eventually, but they did. It was clear that things financially were changing, and I had a pay cut every year for 6 years primarily, which was really scary. And so I kept taking auditions for the majority of that 6 years, just knowing that I can't rely on staying here because this is not going to be financially, viable after a while. And so in that time, I also, was inching closer to 30. And I also met my now husband, who had actually moved back to the Tampa Bay area from North Carolina to pursue a master's degree in business. And because he himself has a degree in trumpet, but became involved in medical sales through a very bizarre way. But anyway, so he ended up, we met after a concert actually of my orchestra, and we became more serious, and we were very, very happy. And he is a native of that area. So we thought, I can live with this job, even if things go south. I'll do something else. I can teach, I can do, a variety of different things having to do with music, and I'll be happy. But he actually, my husband, encouraged me to continue to do this. And so I actually got a call about 6 weeks before our wedding, and from the personnel manager of the Milwaukee Symphony, asking me if I would come and play a week, because somehow I had taken an audition for another orchestra, and one of the musicians of the Milwaukee Symphony had heard that audition. They had been on the committee for that and remembered me. And so they had just sort of known of of my name. And so they asked if I would come and play a week. And so I did, and I accepted. And I had been to Milwaukee about the year prior, when they had their first audition for the principal oboe position after their longtime principal oboist had retired. But that audition yielded in a no hire. And so they asked me if I'd come and sub for a week. I came and played, I think it was Enigma Variations and the Planets. And it was Thanksgiving week. I remember that. So it's actually about 8 years ago, maybe to this day, maybe
Wow.
8 years ago this week, actually. And I went and played the week, and I thought, oh, it's actually going very well. And, I was thinking, this is fantastic, but I'm not going to worry about it because I'm just focused on getting married. I don't really care, what happens, but it's a fun week. It makes me feel good that people are responding well to my playing, and it feels like a great fit, but I'm not going to worry about it. So I remember even like that week showing, while I was playing, I was showing the wind section, like my wedding dress and certain things about my wedding. I was really not focused on the oboe at that point. But then, my husband, my fiance, I guess at the time, was like, you really need to think about doing this. He was extraordinarily supportive, even though he knew the possibilities of, if he was going to encourage me to get another job, that would mean he would be moving away, obviously, from his family. But later in January of 2012, there was the audition for Milwaukee, and I showed up. Actually, I remember that the weather was terrible that day. It was a January audition in Milwaukee, which meant probably sub-zero temperatures and some serious precipitation. And I remember my flight being significantly delayed, and I'm sitting in the airport calling the personal manager saying, I'm late. He's like, don't worry, just get here when you get here. And I think because I had played a week, I was advanced into the semifinals or something of that nature. And then I played about 4 rounds with the audition, and I think the last 2 rounds I played some excerpts with the orchestra wind section. And then at the end of a very long day, they told me that I was the winner. But the preparation for that audition, was no different really than any audition, except for the fact that I really didn't expect anything. Like I said, I had just gotten married. I had really come to terms with the fact that I could be happy doing really whatever I wanted to do. And if that meant staying in an orchestra that financially was in some sort of instability, then I would be okay with that, because I was happy and I could teach and I could continue to make a living in any way that I could. So I know that a lot of players, have a path that they cannot accept anything beyond winning the job, or that's their goal, that's their thing. And of course that was my goal, was to get a better job, but I certainly did not expect that that was going to be something that I could control. And to be honest with you, that's just been the way my focus on auditions has always been, that like, okay, if I'm the one standing at the end and I play the way that I mean to play and that I'm happy with playing myself, then the right opportunity will come along. And that's basically what led me to Milwaukee. And so I feel like the more comfortable I feel with my own, package, my own standard, my own representation of myself as a player, the more confident I am with that, the better the results seem to be for me.
I love that perspective, because when we interviewed Alan Vogel, he said you have the right to the work, but not to the result. So it's a very similar idea of put your effort into the work and let the results happen the way they're going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I'm very lucky. I said at the beginning, my parents were really good for me in terms of this career, because first of all, they never said no to anything. When my teacher Donna would ask them to buy me something, they always made it happen. They always got me where I needed to go. They never said no. They always, encouraged me, sometimes forced me to practice, and they always did that. And I think it's a large part of because each of my parents were driven that way from their own families. I mean, my dad's family was either 100% farmer in the rural areas of Ohio or a teacher. And so there was a lot of really hard work, very hard work. Sometimes I can't even imagine how hard work they did, they had to do in order to survive. And my dad is now retired principal, but he often writes books about the determination and grit that you must have in order to survive in any field. And my mom was the daughter of an engineer, who really was scientific and working really hard at the nitty gritty and the details of all of those types of things. And so I got a real sense early on about how hard I had to work. And to be honest with you, that's what's guided me through my career, not about focusing on one thing, one outcome, but just if I knew that if I worked really hard in whatever I wanted to do, whether it's making reads or practicing or teaching or whatever, I could figure out a way to be okay at the end. And I think sometimes people have a different philosophy on that, but I always was very, and that's the only thing I could rely on was how hard I worked.
Speaking of working hard, you are a principal in a major orchestra, you teach, and you are a wife and a mother. And I would love to hear more about your balance between all of these important aspects of your life, because it seems like when you are in charge of little people, the sense of responsibility is probably really intense. Your responsibility to making sure that your kids are happy and healthy, and that you have a happy and healthy marriage, and that your job is going well. And I just love to hear your perspective on that.
Sure. I think, first of all, being a mom is the best thing that I've ever done in my life, but it's also made me a much better oboe player. It's made me a much better teacher. And I think that it's really, really amazing how all of these things sort of meld together. I used to be the kind of person that would make a bunch of reads and then look at my reads, and I would look at the openings and I would stare at them. I would try them after 1 hour and see what happened. And, I would do all of this ridiculous, sort of, microscopic work. And that just simply is out the window completely. And I remember hearing one of my friends at Rice used to tell me that when he studied with Alex Klein, Alex would make like 2 or 3 reads a week, and that would be whatever he used. Well, that's totally what I'm doing right now. I mean, I make a couple more than maybe 2 reads a week, but I have really tried to figure out a way that to make the system work. And so ultimately, it's forced me to be really efficient. I have a friend that says, I can accomplish now things in 5 minutes that would have taken me 5 hours to do prior to having kids. And that's completely true. So I spend a very short amount of time kind of making reads for the week. And then those are reads that I can fix at the hall during rehearsals and whatnot. Or I can sort of do a little polishing up during a student's lesson. And that's what gets me by. I have an incredibly limited amount of reads at sometimes, and it's sometimes a little bit precarious, but generally speaking, that's a system that works for me. And it kind of, if I have extra time, or if my kids are taking a nap or they're at school or something like that, I can get a little bit more work done. But like I said, it's forced me to be much more equipped in dealing with the details of my reads, and also of practicing. They actually asked me to play the Strauss Concerto here in Milwaukee with, at the time, our music director, Ado DeVart, a couple of years ago. And the artistic administrator called me on the phone, and he said, Katie, we'd really like if you would do the Strauss with Ado. And, Ado himself was an oboist from the Concertgebouw. And so I said, oh my gosh, this is an amazing opportunity and I can't wait to do it. However, I'm just about to announce that I'm pregnant for my first baby. And I don't know if this is going to be possible. I have never had a baby before. I don't know. I've also never played the Strauss Concerto with an orchestra before. And I said, I thought about it for about 2 seconds in my head, and I'm thinking, okay, I have to say yes, because I'll never have this opportunity. Ado will not be around here in Milwaukee forever, and I want to do this piece with him, and I don't want to say no. I'm not the kind of person that generally says no to things like that. And so I said yes, and I played the Strauss with the orchestra after when my first baby was 5 months old, which
Wow.
Now that I think about it was kind of ridiculous. And I thought, wow, this is a very unique opportunity in a lot of different ways. I was like pumping, milk right before I was about to go out on stage. And it's just, this is just the way my life is. But obviously it worked out. And it's the kind of thing where I can't imagine my life in any other way. I see people in my orchestra who don't have children, or who have less things to worry about in terms of the day-to-day things that I do. And so I think I envy them in a way, but I also am very glad that it's forced me to really get my act together, so to speak, and be very efficient, because then I can say to one of my students, you have 5 minutes after swim practice, before you've got to start your homework, before you want to hang out with your friends. If I have 5 minutes, you have 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do this. You can practice this passage from, the Fairling or the Barrett or whatever, and you can put a little, bow on it before you go out and do these things. And then you'll be able to go on, and make some progress yourself. So in a way, motherhood has really helped me be able to do some of those things more efficiently, more cleanly, and certainly more succinctly to help other students.
Can you tell us about a favorite memory of a past performance that sticks out in your mind?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of them. We actually just had one a few months ago here. We have a new music director, Ken David Mazur, who's terrific, and he just started in the fall with us. One of his first programs, if not the first actually, was the Rose and Cavalier Suite of Strauss, which, I think for any oboe player is one of the most enjoyable pieces. It's just so luxurious. It's like wrapping yourself up in a big piece of really rich silk or a beautiful perfume or something like that. It's just really indulgent in a way. And so that's been one of my most recent fond memories. But there's been many. Obviously, the Strauss performances with Ado have to be on the top of my list as well. He was so generous as an oboist. He knew every instinct that I was going to have, and musically speaking, regardless of being an oboist, he was just so responsive and helpful to me in that process, and really guided me throughout that whole experience, being a little timid and also a little getting my sea legs back after having had a baby. But also, a lot of concerts we did with Ado during his time here were really standouts. His final concert was Mahler's Third, and I think for me, anytime I get to play a Mahler symphony is a really special occasion. But certainly that piece and the magnitude of that piece and the demands that I have as an individual as part of that piece, playing first oboe on that piece is also extraordinarily, meticulous and challenging at times. And so navigating something like that, being part of a journey like that, seeing a man of such an esteemed, reputation as Ado seeing the end of his time in Milwaukee was very special. But, there's been times I can remember, from 20 years ago playing with friends of mine at Eastman that I recall as being standout performances too. So I think it's fun to have standout moments, but it's also really important to be in the moment and find that this is, when you're approaching the next piece or the next concert, you think, okay, this is going to be it. You know what I mean? I'm going to put everything I have into this moment and make it really a special time. So I sort of have both of those in my life, fortunately. So
What advice would you give to a young musician who aspires to have a career like yours?
First of all, I think the most important thing to do is to realize that you're going to be beaten down a lot. And the nature of being an artist is to be able to endure that kind of negativity. And I think you have to work really hard to make yourself surrounded by people who can empower you, who can help you thrive during those difficult times, but also, making sure that you never underestimate your ability to work hard. And, you've got to put yourself in a position where you can really have no other distractions and really think about how you want to get from point A to point B to make this piece or this excerpt or this etude sound better the next day. I tell my young students and my college students to never go into a practice session without a plan, because a lot of times, kids, and I was one of them, at the age of 9, I was told my parents, would never let me go outside and play with my friends or do this or that, go to the movies or whatnot, unless I practice. And I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean to just go in and practice? Okay, I'll sit in a room and I'll play this thing for 30 minutes until the timer is literally up. But I think that I had to be, because I was encouraged to do that, I had to figure out a way in college, especially after that, to figure out what I was going to do with that time and how I was going to make it good. And so the advice I guess I would give a young student is just figure out how to do that as early as you possibly can, so that practicing is never a chore, but it's actually an experience of something that goes from one thing to the other, and that you feel like by the end of a practice session, even if it's only 5 minutes, you've accomplished something. Because I think kids are they're practicing is an enigma to a lot of people, and they don't understand how to really make it productive. And I think that's the most important thing to understand about practicing, is that that's the only way you're going to get better. But you cannot just do it to do it. You have to do it to make progress, and you have to be able to be self-critical enough to know how that progress is happening, and you have to be able to evaluate yourself each and every time you play. What has changed? What is not changing? What needs to change? Etc. And that's something that's really important. I think a lot of students have a terrifically difficult time evaluating their own performances or their own practice. I hate listening to recordings of myself, but my husband actually loves listening to recordings, and he forces me to go online. The Milwaukee Symphony allows us to listen to our own recordings on our little musician portal, and he forces me, like sometimes even the night of the concert, he'll go onto that portal and be listening to something or whatnot, and it forces me to listen. I'm like, I can't do it, but that's really important. And students these days, it's so easy for them to just pick up their phone, turn on a recording. It doesn't have to sound good. It's not going to be, a world, renowned recording, but it's just something that you can have privately to analyze yourself. And you don't have to analyze it that night. You can analyze it 2 or 3 days from then or a week from then. But it's important to have a document, because to be honest with you, until you hear it, it doesn't change, and the progress doesn't happen. And so that self-evaluation, I think, is really key. into making efficient and fast progress.
Katherine, thank you so, so much for talking with us on Double Reed Dish. We really had a wonderful time speaking with you.
Oh, thank you so much. I think what you guys are doing and getting everyone to collaborate on this type of a project, I think is fantastic, and I hope it helps a lot of people. It's certainly been fun for me to listen to other people as well.
That's awesome. We hope you loved that interview as much as we did. As always, you can find us on all of the social media platforms. You can listen to us on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, and I think anywhere you can find your podcasts. We love hearing from you. So if you have a comment or a question, please feel free to email us at doublereeddish@gmail.com. Jackie, who do we have coming up next on the podcast?
We will be kicking off 2020 with Ann Bilderback, principal bassoonist of the Kansas City Symphony, and Luna is so excited for it.
She is so excited. Jackie, time to end this nerd parade.
All right, go make reeds.